Oh, Captain, my Captain. Yes, Club Fantasies DFS Showdown slate video is back, and we are previewing Super Bowl 58. It is the Kansas City Chiefs versus the San Francisco 49ers. I am the Captain, Joshua Hudson. This is my compass, Austin Amandolia. Austin, before we get into all the fun categories and breaking down this slate, remind everybody where they can play Super Bowl DFS Showdown with us.
Yeah, you can play on DraftKings with us. There's a link in the description. We will have a showdown slate for this game. FanDuel, unfortunately, does not allow me to create a showdown contest for our league. But if you want to go ahead and join that league and be ready to play DFS with us next year, you could do that too.
Love it. All right. If you've seen any of these DFS Showdown videos so far, you know that we have some fun little categories. We like to kind of break the slate down. We're going to start with our first category, which is Captain Chalk. And yes, every DFS slate has the chalk play. Austin, pretty much been your chalk play every single time the San Francisco 49ers are around.
Yeah, and he's been the chalk play of the year. It's Christian McCaffrey. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about some game theory with the showdown slate this week, because depending on the contest you're playing in, you want to think about how to get your lineup to be different than all of the rest to give you most of the upside. So there's not a ton of analysis that goes into why Christian McCaffrey is a good pick. He is a good pick because Kansas City, you can run on them, and Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the league. Easy. If you're playing in some large tournaments, I think one thing that's really fun to do with Christian McCaffrey is to have him as your captain and then just completely build the rest of your lineup with Kansas City Chiefs players. Because what if the Kansas City Chiefs just roll, but Christian McCaffrey is the highest scoring player on the slate? I could see that happening. He could score 2 touchdowns, catch 6 passes, and San Francisco lose because Patrick Mahomes just threw it around the yard to all of the random receivers on that team, and Kansas City scores a defensive touchdown, right? Like, there's an interesting scenario here where you have the best scoring player from a fantasy perspective not be on the winning team. And I like this build with Christian McCaffrey. Particularly, I'm doing one of the 150 max entries on FanDuel because they have that nice little
high stakes, huh?
It's a 5-cent contest. So it's $7.50 to max it out. And so it's a fun time to try it out. Absolutely. So I'm doing this. I'm doing Christian McCaffrey, and then I'm stacking it with 4 Chiefs, and we're going to see how it goes. I think it's a fun way to build this week, and I would be interested in that in single entry slates where not a lot of people are going to feel comfortable doing that.
And for what it's worth, while the Kansas City Chiefs have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs among playoff teams in the playoffs, they have allowed 6 receptions per game to running backs. Wheels up Christian McCaffrey. Our next category is the Mutineer, because everybody's vying for that captain's role, and let's face it, we need to be contrarian, and that is exactly what these picks are, to offer us a little bit of variety and upside in larger tournaments. Let's stay on the San Francisco side. Tell me why you like George Kittle here.
Yeah, I like George Kittle because he's not going to face off against L'Jarius Sneed. That's the simple answer there. He's also probably not going to face off against Trent McDuffie. Those corners and those safeties on the Kansas City side, they're pretty tough. I think they're a little bit weaker at linebacker, and George Kittle can really dice up their linebacking core, get open for some deep targets down the field. So I just like the matchup here, and I think not a lot of people are going to play George Kittle as a captain. He's one of these tight ends that he is similar to Travis Kelce in that he functions as a receiver oftentimes, and I think that he's just going to go overlooked. I think people are going to want to play Debo. They're going to want to play Brandon Ayuk at captain. George Kittle could be 5% rostered in the captain slot this week, and if he is the highest scoring player, it's going to really increase your odds of taking down a tournament.
All right, now talk to me a little bit about Rashee Rice.
Yeah, sort of the reverse argument. I think that's how that works. He does not have to face the San Francisco 49ers linebacking core because they are incredible. And instead, he gets to beat up on the San Francisco secondary, which I think is a more favorable matchup for Kansas City. the great thing about Rashee Rice, he's going to get some bubble screens on the outside. He's going to get some, quick targets on the outside. He's not going to have to deal with Fred Warner and the other guy that I'm forgetting right now. That is going to just try to make Travis Kelce's life miserable. So I think it's a fun play. Dre Greenlaw, thank you. And that is a similar argument to George Kittle. I think he's going to be pretty low rostered as a captain. He might be more highly rostered than George Kittle because he is the top receiver outside of Kelce on the Kansas City side. But I think the matchup is good enough that if he's even 10% rostered at the captain spot, that's fine.
No, I like the Rice pick. San Francisco gets torched by wide receivers. Just in the playoffs alone, they're allowing on average 10 catches, 142 yards, and a touchdown to opposing wide receivers. And the third most fantasy points per game at 17.4 just on the outside. So this lines up very well for Rashee Rice to absolutely ball. I want to bring up one alternate captain here because I don't see him on your show sheet. But I want to know why you're sleeping on Isiah Pacheco, because the San Francisco run defense is absolute dog shit. Just in the playoffs alone, San Francisco is allowing 131 rushing yards per game. That's 5.3 yards per carry and a touchdown per game to running backs. That is an easy 19 fantasy points alone right there for Pacheco. And let's face it, we're not seeing Clyde Edwards-Helaire in this game because he can't pass block. And quite frankly, he sucks. Isiah Pacheco as an alternate captain, in my opinion, wheels up. I am all about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great play. The only reason he's not in the show sheet is because I picked 2 players per category, and I decided to not break that rule this week. But I do like Pacheco as a contrarian captain option, especially if you're doing those 20 max entries, the 150 max entries if you're going that way. I'm definitely going to have some exposure to him as my captain, particularly if you want to say that this game has a slow game script, that it's slow scoring, and that Kansas City is able to slow down Christian McCaffrey. You probably still want to have McCaffrey in your lineup, even if you have Pacheco as the captain, but it's a good way to get different and to have some salary savings and just bet on this game hitting the under. Like, we've seen some pretty gross Super Bowls before. 17-7 would not be that shocking for the way these two teams play.
Yeah, and all of the inconsistencies with the San Francisco 49ers leading up to this week, fire alarm in the hotel, soggy field conditions at their practice field, like everything is against the San Francisco 49ers, apparently. That's going to be the narrative. Can't wait for that one. All right, next category is the first mate, because every captain needs a reliable crew. So these are going to be the standouts that help maximize your lineup. We've talked, obviously, about both teams here. Let's just go with Mr. Swift himself, Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the narrative sets it all up itself, right? He's going to ball in the Super Bowl, and then he's going to ride off into the sunset with Taylor Swift, although I don't believe that. I think he's probably going to continue playing personally, but that's just me. No, Travis Kelce, it's just, I don't care how good Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner are. I can't bet against Travis Kelce. They're going to try and put those two in a bind all day long. And the thing about Kelce is they've been getting creative ways to get him involved in the offense. They will line him up out wide, get him open on a bubble screen, allow him to just go and mow some guys down. And I still think that when it comes to the red zone, he is one of their biggest weapons. If he were to score 2 touchdowns in this game, nobody would be shocked. It would be the perfect storybook ending to a year where everybody thought Travis Kelce was done. So I like having him in my lineup pretty much no matter what. I'm obviously going to try and not just have him in every lineup because that's a bad DFS strategy, but he's definitely someone that I'm willing on being overweight on the field on.
Just in the playoffs alone, San Francisco is allowing 18.1 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. 8.5 receptions per game.
And they have not played good tight ends. They played Tucker Kraft and I can't remember the other one because he was hurt all year. The 2 rookie tight ends from Green Bay. And then
and then they played the Lions, Sam Laporta.
Now that's a little bit better, but he was hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, he was banged up heading into that game. So
it's also like with guys like Laporta and for Travis Kelce's sake, like he doesn't have to just do work on the middle of the field, right? Like typical tight ends, they're not as athletic. They're not going to be stretching the field or getting out wide. Travis Kelce, it's a different story. He's not going to, they will find ways to keep him not just facing Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner all game.
All right, we've talked a little bit about some San Francisco weapons. So let's talk some Brock Purdy here, because somebody's got to get those guys the football, right?
Yeah, I like Brock Purdy in my lineups this week. I like him, even if you're putting Christian McCaffrey as your captain. We've talked about this before. He and Brock Purdy have had pretty good correlation throughout the year. So even if you're betting on Christian McCaffrey popping off, I'm not afraid of putting Brock Purdy in my lineup with him, just because Christian McCaffrey could easily have 2 receiving touchdowns. Brock Purdy's going to be throwing the ball. I'm not predicting another UCL fiasco in the Super Bowl, although that would be devastating. I think, there's a decent chance that Brock Purdy is able to score a couple of touchdowns. And what's interesting about him, we talked about this also, quarterbacks are more likely to scramble and run the ball in the postseason. And we saw him use his legs last week when he needed to. I think he's going to need to this week. I think Kansas City is going to try and line him up. Steve Spagnuolo is going to throw up some blitz packages to try and throw Purdy off. And I doubt they're going to be having a spy waiting for Purdy to take off. They're going to challenge Purdy to stand in the pocket and throw the ball, which could allow Purdy to get some big explosive runs under pressure.
I believe it. I like it. All right, next category here is going to be the deck scrubbers. These are the cheaper punt play options that can make or break your lineup based on one play and or limited opportunity. Let's start with the actual position player here. Tell me why Justin Watson is your guy over some of the other scrubs, basically, on this Kansas City wide receiver core.
Yeah, so if I'm being honest, if I'm playing in those 150 max entry contests, I'm going to have a lot of exposure to a lot of different guys. I'm going to get some Justin Watson. I'm going to get some MBS. I don't know that I'm going to get Skyy Moore. We'll talk about him later. I'll even get some Kadarius Toney in there a little bit, some Mecole Hardman, just because nobody's going to be playing them. And in a 150 max entry, you're trying to get creative. You're trying to get different. So I think there's a lot of different directions you can go. But let's say you're doing a single entry. The guy I would prioritize is Justin Watson. And it's because it's a similar argument that we had with Rashee Rice earlier on. The corners, the secondary in San Francisco is not their strength. And I think Justin Watson is going to be a person that can easily fly under the radar and end up wide open, because San Francisco is going to be focused on stopping Mahomes, Kelce, and Rice. And so Watson could easily get open that way.
For what it's worth, talking about the weapons there, I'm using quotes, in the Chiefs wide receiver room. MVS comes in at $3K on DraftKings. Justin Watson, $2,400. Skyy Moore, $2K. Hardman, $1.6. Toney, $1,400. And Richie James at $400, for what it's worth. Now let's stay on that Kansas City sideline. And I love this pick. I want to call this out really quick, because if anybody watches Good Morning Football on NFL Network, they know that Peter Schrager has a history of calling some really good winners here in the Super Bowl. I believe he's done it 4 years in a row. He pegged this exact matchup at the very beginning of the season, Kansas City versus San Francisco. Before last year's Super Bowl, he predicted Nick Bolton would have a game-changing interception or touchdown or something. He did it. And this year, he called for another Chiefs touchdown on defense, this time by Trent McDuffie. So let's talk a little bit about this Kansas City defense and why you like them as a potential roster spot here in Flex Plays.
Yeah, that's exactly where my brain is headed on this, because one of the things that may be surprising to folks, or maybe not if you've been actually watching the games, about Brock Purdy is that he's had a decent amount of turnover-worthy plays, according to PFF, throughout the year. And yet, those turnover-worthy plays have not always translated into turnovers themselves. He's gotten away with some bad passes, some tough opportunities, particularly in the playoffs. There were a couple of throws against Green Bay that would have been automatic pick sixes if the Green Bay defenders had just caught the ball. I don't think Kansas City is going to let those opportunities pass them up. They've been here before. same show, same rodeo. They're not going to let the jitters get to them. I think that there is a very real chance that Kansas City has the, or more so that Brock Purdy has the turnover regression hit him in this game and he throws a pick or two, and that Kansas City is able to take advantage of it. So I will have exposure to the Kansas City Chiefs defense and a decent amount of my lineups. I usually don't like going after the defenses in showdown slates, but I think this is the perfect opportunity to do it because we know both teams are going to want to slow the game down. They're want to keep the ball out of the hands of both offenses, and Kansas City has that high upside as a defense that it warrants playing them more often than you typically would.
I like it. All right, before we get to the final category, one more time, you can play this DFS Showdown slate against us here at Club Fantasy over on DraftKings. Hit the link below in the description. It'll take you over to our league that happens to be on DraftKings. And you can line up those showdown slates and maybe try to win some of our money. With that said, the final category is the Kraken, because every captain needs their villain. And let's face it, these are the lineup traps that are aiming to sink that ship. We've already brought up his name once. He was just activated off of IR. Why are we fading Skyy Moore? Outside of because he sucks.
Well, because he was just activated off of IR. That's the primary reason. So I was listening to the Athletic Football Show earlier today, and they were talking to Mitchell Schwartz, who talked about the fact that Andy Reid would have installed the game plan for this week, or for this game last week. Skyy Moore they didn't know he was going to be playing at that point. So unlike the typical Andy Reid style game plan where he's going to have some weird plays set up for some random players, I doubt that's going to be the case for Skyy Moore. We have no idea what we're getting for him. There's way too many other players that are now in this offense who could take that random touchdown. Richie James is a good candidate. Mecole Hardman's a good candidate. They were trying to get him involved earlier in the playoffs. So I don't see it happening for Skyy Moore. It's just he hasn't been on the field enough for me to have the evidence that he'll have some play designed specifically for him. So I'm avoiding him in basically all of my lineups this week.
Hey, I'm with you. I haven't been the biggest Skyy Moore fan, so missing half the season or whatever it was and him coming back this week, yeah, I'm not seeing it. Another guy that I'm really not seeing it with, let's talk about CEH, because dude sucks. He ain't it.
Yeah, so I will caveat this with saying I'm definitely not playing CEH in like 20 max entries or single entries. I might play a little bit of him in 150 max entries if you're going that route.
If it's 150, I probably would too.
Yeah, just because especially on FanDuel, because on FanDuel, we have seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire get a touchdown randomly, and FanDuel is such a touchdown-oriented site that could actually be really important for you. So in that situation, I'm more likely to go with CEH. But other than that, not happening. He's not going to touch the ball unless Pacheco needs a breathe break. And even then, Michael Pirine has kind of gotten a little action here and there. So I'm not convinced that CEH is going to be the best play this week. It just doesn't feel like it's going to happen. Maybe in a large field tournament, but it just seems so unlikely. It seems like they're just going to ride Isiah Pacheco. It's the last game of the year. Pacheco's going to have plenty of time to rest up.
What an absolute waste of a first-round pick. All right. That has been the last episode of Oh Captain, My Captain, the Club Fantasy DFS Showdown videos. I'm Josh Hudson. You can follow me at the One Hudsonian on basically all the socials, but Twitter mainly. That is Austin Amandolia at Austin_FFL. You will see us all throughout the offseason talking mock drafts, core show, no pun intended. I'm sure there's probably some best ball shows that might be popping up. Who knows, right? But till then, we will see you next time. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Take it easy, folks.